There comes a moment when love must stop negotiating with pain, when the heart, tired of explaining itself, finally stands still and listens to its own wisdom. This is not a message of anger. It is not a threat. It is not a plea. It is a sacred pause where you choose yourself without apology. Understand this truth. Anyone who avoids depth fears the mirror of presence. When you stop chasing, when you stop proving, when you stop translating your worth into smaller words so it can be swallowed, something profound happens. The absence you create becomes undeniable. Not because you vanished, but because you finally arrived in your own life. This goodbye is not rejection. It is recognition. Recognition that love should feel like grounding, not guessing. That connection should feel like expansion, not exhaustion. You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person to rise. Wisdom teaches us that what resists clarity is not confused. It is protected by fear. Purpose teaches us that every delay is a lesson, but every lesson has an expiration date. And divine order reminds us that when something refuses to meet you in truth, it is not meant to walk with you into destiny. So this is the final goodbye, not spoken with trembling hands, but with a steady soul, a goodbye that does not explain, justify, or wait for understanding, because the moment you choose peace over potential, alignment over attachment, you shift the entire dynamic. What once felt powerful now feels exposed. What once felt distant now feels the weight of your absence. This is where the door closes without a slam, where love withdraws its energy and returns it to its source. You do not leave to be missed. You leave to be whole. And in that wholeness, you break every cycle that required your silence to survive. After this, you cannot go back, not because you are forbidden, but because you are free. Detachment is not an act of cruelty, nor is it a sign that love was shallow or false. Detachment is the moment self-respect finally speaks louder than longing. It is the quiet decision to stop abandoning yourself in hopes that someone else will choose you. Many confuse detachment with indifference, but indifference is numbness, while detachment is awareness. Detachment sees clearly and still chooses peace. When you detach, you are not withdrawing love. You are withdrawing access to your energy. You are no longer offering your time, emotions, and spirit to a space where they are not honored. This is not punishment directed outward. It is protection directed inward. The soul was never meant to beg for reciprocity. Love that demands self-erasure is not love. It is a lesson waiting to be learned. Self-respect moves quietly. It does not announce itself. It does not argue or explain. It simply changes behavior. Detachment is the embodiment of that change. It is the moment you stop responding out of habit and start responding out of truth. You stop filling silences that are not yours to heal. You stop carrying emotional weight that was never meant to be yours alone. Divine wisdom teaches that attachment without alignment leads to suffering. When you cling to what consistently withholds clarity, you distort your own inner compass. Detachment restores that compass. It brings you back into alignment with your values, your boundaries, and your sense of worth. You realize that your peace is not something to be negotiated. It is something to be preserved. Detachment also exposes truth. When you step back, patterns reveal themselves without distortion. You begin to see whether someone leans toward you in absence or only responds in convenience. This awareness can be uncomfortable, but it is sacred. It strips illusion and replaces hope rooted in fantasy with faith rooted in self-trust. Purpose emerges the moment you stop chasing validation. Energy once spent overanalyzing messages, waiting for effort, or excusing inconsistency returns to you, and when it does, you feel lighter, clearer, stronger. Detachment creates space for growth, for divine redirection, for relationships that meet you with presence instead of avoidance. This is why detachment transforms rather than destroys. It does not close the heart. It strengthens it. It teaches you that walking away from what diminishes you is not a failure of love, but an affirmation of your sacred value. When self-respect begins to move, everything misaligned either rises to meet it or falls away. Closure is often misunderstood as something another person gives you, a final explanation, an apology, or a perfectly worded confession that makes the pain make sense. But truth teaches otherwise. Closure is not granted, it is claimed. It is not found in answers, but in alignment with your own truth. Waiting for someone else to close a chapter keeps your power outside of you, suspended in uncertainty. Alignment brings that power home. When you seek answers from someone who avoids depth, you unknowingly ask them to give what they themselves lack. This creates a loop of disappointment, because misaligned people cannot provide clarity without first confronting themselves, and most will choose distance over self-examination. Closure, then, becomes delayed, not because it is complicated, but because it is misplaced. Alignment begins the moment you stop asking, why did they do this? And start asking, what is this teaching me? That shift is subtle, but it is transformative. Instead of trying to understand their silence, inconsistency, or withdrawal, you begin to listen to what your inner wisdom has been saying all along. The discomfort you felt was not confusion. It was intuition signaling misalignment. Divine principles remind us that peace is a signpost. Anything that repeatedly disturbs your peace is not meant to be decoded endlessly. It is meant to be released. Alignment does not require every question to be answered. It requires honesty about how something makes you feel and courage to honor that truth without needing permission. When you align with yourself, the nervous system settles. The mind stops racing. The heart no longer waits at doors that remain closed. This is closure in its purest form, not emotional shutdown, but emotional coherence. Your thoughts, values, boundaries, and actions begin to point in the same direction. That direction is forward. Purpose also sharpens in alignment. You realize that some connections exist not to last, but to awaken discernment. They reveal where you compromised yourself, where you ignored red flags in the name of hope, where you mistook potential for presence. Closure comes when you accept the lesson without demanding a rewrite of the story. There is a quiet grief in this realization, but also immense relief. You stop replaying conversations in your mind. You stop drafting messages that will never be sent. You stop seeking validation from someone who could not meet you in truth. Instead, you validate yourself by choosing consistency, clarity, and self-respect. Alignment does not erase the past, it integrates it. It turns pain into wisdom and longing into discernment. And once alignment is restored, closure is no longer a moment. It is a state of being. You are no longer waiting to feel complete. You already are. Silence is often feared because it removes the illusion of control. Words can persuade, plead, explain, and soften truth. But silence leaves nothing to negotiate with. When silence is chosen consciously, it becomes an act of sovereignty rather than avoidance. It is the moment you stop reacting and start standing in your power. This kind of silence is not emptiness, it is presence without pursuit. Many people speak in hopes of being understood, but when communication becomes one-sided, words lose their dignity. Repeating your needs to someone who consistently avoids meeting them teaches the wrong lesson, that your boundaries are flexible and your limits negotiable. Conscious silence interrupts that pattern. It communicates, without explanation, that access to you is earned through respect, not persistence. There is wisdom in restraint. Ancient spiritual teachings remind us that energy flows where attention goes. When you stop feeding confusion with constant communication, clarity begins to surface. Silence creates space, and space reveals truth. Without your emotional labor filling the gaps, the dynamic is forced to stand on its own. What remains becomes unmistakable. Purpose is refined in silence. You begin to notice how often you are overextending, replying quickly, initiating contact, carrying emotional weight that was never reciprocated. In silence, that imbalance becomes visible. You are no longer distracted by hope or habit. You see reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. Conscious silence also restores dignity. There is power in not explaining yourself to those who were unwilling to listen when you spoke. Silence says, I trust my actions to speak. aka, for me, it is not meant to punish, it is meant to protect. Protect your peace, your time, your emotional clarity. When you stop chasing resolution through words, resolution finds you through truth. Divine principles teach that stillness precedes revelation. In the quiet, intuition becomes louder. You start to feel rather than overthink. You recognize which connections feel safe and which drain your spirit. Silence aligns you with your inner voice, the one that was often drowned out by the noise of justification and second-guessing. What makes conscious silence so powerful is that it cannot be manipulated. There is nothing to argue with, nothing to twist, nothing to avoid. It stands firm and unmovable. For those accustomed to distance without consequence, your silence introduces reflection. It reflects the absence they once took for granted. This silence is not the end of communication. It is the end of self-betrayal. It marks the moment you stop using words to earn presence and start using boundaries to honor yourself. And in that quiet strength, you reclaim authority over your emotional world. There is a higher intelligence at work in every ending, even the ones that arrive without explanation or closure. Divine order does not operate through chaos, though it often appears that way in the moment. It operates through alignment, correction, and redirection. When something consistently drains you, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, it is not a sign to try harder. It is a cess. Ignore that you are being prepared for something greater than what you are holding on to. What drains you is rarely evil. It is simply misaligned. Some connections enter your life to test your boundaries, not to stay forever. When you resist releasing what exhausts you, you delay your own becoming. Divine wisdom removes what weakens your spirit, not as punishment but as preparation. Every loss carries instruction, even when it feels undeserved. Often we cling because familiarity feels safer than uncertainty, but divine principles teach that stagnation is more dangerous than change. Growth requires space, and space cannot exist when your energy is constantly consumed by confusion, inconsistency, or emotional labor that yields no nourishment. When divine order intervenes, it creates separation so transformation can occur. You may not recognize what is draining you while you are inside it. Emotional attachment clouds discernment. It is only after distance is created that clarity emerges. This is why removal often feels sudden or painful. It bypasses your rationalizations and forces honesty. The discomfort is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of recalibration. Purpose is refined through subtraction. Just as a sculptor removes excess stone to reveal the form within, divine order removes what does not belong to your next version. What remains is stronger, clearer, and more aligned with your truth. You begin to see that the energy you were pouring into something unreciprocated as meant to be invested inward, into your growth, your healing, and your calling. There is also mercy in removal. What drains you over time erodes your sense of self, often so subtly that you normalize exhaustion. Divine order interrupts this slow erosion. It restores your vitality by breaking cycles. You were too compassionate or too hopeful to end on your own. This is not abandonment, it is rescue. When something leaves your life, it creates a vacuum. That space is not meant to be filled immediately. It is meant to be honored. In that space, you reconnect with your intuition, your faith, and your strength. You begin to recognize that what is meant for you will never require you to shrink, chase, or endure constant depletion. Divine order is always moving you toward expansion, even when the path begins with loss. What drains you must go, so that what sustains you can arrive. Walking away with peace is one of the most disruptive acts you can commit against an unhealthy pattern. Conflict feeds cycles. Explanations feed cycles. Emotional reactions feed cycles. But peace starves them. When you leave without anger, without dramatics, without needing to be understood, you remove the fuel that kept the pattern alive. What remains is clarity, and clarity has consequences. Most patterns survive because they rely on emotional availability without accountability. When you stay engaged, trying to fix, rescue, or be chosen, you unknowingly reinforce the behavior that hurts you. Walking away with peace is not passive, it is precise. It says, I will not participate in dynamics that require my self-betrayal. That decision alone collapses cycles that words never could. Peace is powerful because it cannot be argued with. Anger invites defense, sadness invites avoidance, but peace stands firm, unreactive, and complete. It communicates finality without cruelty. Those accustomed to unresolved emotional loops often expect confrontation or closure conversations. When those never come, the pattern loses its grip. There is nothing left to pull you back in. There is wisdom in choosing peace over proof. You do not need to demonstrate your pain for it to be valid. You do not need to convince someone of your worth for it to exist. Peace is the inner confirmation that you have nothing left to explain. When you walk away grounded instead of wounded, you reclaim authority over your emotional narrative. Divine principles teach that cycles repeat until the lesson is integrated. Peace signals integration. It shows that you no longer need chaos to feel connection or struggle to feel significant. When you exit calmly, you end the karmic exchange. The lesson is complete. The energy is returned. Purpose also clarifies in peaceful departure. You begin to see how much time and vitality was spent sustaining something that did not sustain you. Walking away frees that energy for creation rather than correction. Your focus shifts from managing emotional uncertainty to building a life that reflects your values. What makes peaceful departure so transformative is that it breaks internal patterns as much as external ones. You stop equating love with endurance. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You stop believing that staying proves strength. Peace redefines strength as discernment and self-honor. This kind of ending does not seek revenge or validation. It trusts divine justice and inner alignment. When you leave peacefully, you do not carry resentment forward. You carry wisdom, and wisdom changes how you choose, how you love, and how you allow yourself to be treated. Walking away with peace is not an escape. It is an evolution. Thank you for the lessons that strengthened my spirit and clarified my worth. Goodbye to what no longer aligns with the peace I now choose to protect.